I'm Greg Hunter, and this is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, February 24th, 2012. Lots going on in the world. I'm only going to talk about a few stories today. And the biggest one this week is Syria. Now, there's been a bloody revolution going on for months. Thousands have been killed just this past week. Dozens were killed in more fighting over there, including a couple of foreign journalists covering the war over there. But that's not really the big story. It just highlights what's going on, that the conflict is getting worse, that the revolution is getting more intense, and now the U.S. is talking about giving help, aid, to the rebels. Now, we're not talking about food, water, and medicine. If that was the kind of aid we're talking about, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But we're talking about military aid. And the Obama administration is talking about another lead from behind. That's what they called the operation in Syria. You know, a lead from behind operation where they used NATO. But that's really absurd because NATO is, for all intents and purposes, mostly a U.S. organization. I mean, after all, a United States general heads up NATO. So leading from behind in Syria is like the U.S. going to war in Syria or getting involved in Syria. And Syria is not Libya. Gaddafi really didn't have that many staunch allies. Syria is another question. For one thing, and a lot of Americans don't know this, that the Russians have a naval base off the Syrian coast. Now, imagine if somebody was trying to undermine a place where we had a naval base, like Japan. How do you think that would go over with the U.S. military? Not very well. And it's not going to go over very well with the Russian military. Syria also is a big allies with Iran and China. And Russia and China, who have seats on the Security Council, have been blocking resolutions to try to stop Bashar Assad, the president of Syria, and trying to stop his brutal crackdown. So what we have is a full-blown, bloody civil war. And the big headline should be America is thinking about getting involved militarily in Syria. Across the Middle East, on the other side of the Middle East, in Iran is now threatening a first strike against Israel. They say that just came out this past week that if they feel that an attack is imminent or if their national interests are undermined, that they can't rule out a first strike attack. And after all, that's not all that far-fetched. I mean, remember when the EU came out with these sanctions and told Iran, we're going to stop buying your crude oil this summer? Well, Iran this past week said, you know what, we're going to cut you off this week. 700,000 barrels of oil, boom, cut out of the European market just like that. So them having a first strike probably isn't that far-fetched. Not at all. Now, is there any wonder why the price of oil is climbing and the price of gold is also climbing? I wouldn't be surprised to see $5 a gallon gasoline by this summer and $2,000 an ounce gold. Either one of these countries, Syria or Iran, Iran also has big allies in Russia and in China, and this has some major superpower implications if the United States and NATO get involved in either of these countries. And even if Iran attacks Israel first, the U.S. is going to be involved. If the United States gets involved militarily with Syria, it's not just a NATO operation. The U.S. would be involved, and either of these places could touch off World War III. And I'm not being too dramatic. And finally, Greece. They say they have a bailout deal. They're actually funneling them, loaning them $170+ billion more dollars to try to get them into austerity plans. They've had, attacks. They've had protests, violent, bloody, gas bomb, rock throwing protest over there. And the people who are in control right now say, well, we have an austerity deal and everything's going to be okay. But there are elections in Greece in April, and the anti-bailout party is really gaining steam. So any deal that they cut now could be completely nullified if there's a change of power, and I look for there to be a change of power. That's all the stories I'm talking about this week. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you for supporting USAWatchdog.com.